Welcome to Module 3. I'm Reitzel-Bowker. Let's get started. Welcome back, everyone. We are now entering our final video for this course, Introduction to Sketchup, and I'm very, very excited for this piece today because we're going to be able to do a lot of fun things in terms of the visual appearance of our file. So to start, I'm going to get everyone to look for something that might be sort of something fun to play with. So maybe we'll just type in the word house and we'll go to the models area. This is in our 3D warehouse. And what I'd like you to do is maybe select a house that doesn't look too huge, has a few materials on it, and something that we can look at a few different views. I'm going to go ahead and choose this house right here. And I'm going to download it and bring it into my model. Now to start with today, we're going to be exploring the View menu. And what we want to do is take a look at some of our options in helping our drawing to look a little bit more like a construction drawing or perhaps a little bit more realistic. So if we do take a look at this drawing, we will notice that in the very same way that we've been working all along, that we do have edges along every sort of surface. We see a lot of the great texture here on the building. It's not terribly realistic, but it does give us a good sort of basis of what SketchUp will give us as a default. But we can play with these settings. So let's take a look at that. Under View, first of all, I want to direct you to where we have something called Edge Style. Now, in more advanced SketchUp classes, we would be learning how to change the type of edges that we have so we can create construction drawings using some of these edges. But we're going to go with the basics here today, and we'll start by perhaps turning on all of our edges. So let's click on Back Edges. You'll notice that the regular edge profile is selected already, and so that's why we're seeing an edge. And also by default, you'll notice that Profile Edges typically is selected as well. If not, you can go ahead and select that. But let's go ahead and choose Back Edges. Now with Back Edges on, you'll notice that I essentially get a see-through version of the drawing. Seems kind of silly to be seeing back edges on a house like this, but quite useful if we were designing or drawing a 3D model of a kitchen, for example. This would enable us to see the shelving behind or any hardware that you wanted to indicate or show. So that's what it would look like with back edges on. Let's go back to the View menu and turn on Depth Cue. And you'll notice that our edge line very much thickens. Well, if I wanted to do a section cut of the house, it might be a nice feature. Let's go ahead and turn our back edges off. It might be nice to actually turn that depth edge or that depth cue on so that we can get a thicker edge or a thicker line to the outside of whatever it is we're drawing or modeling. Back to Edge Style, we can turn on Extension, and we will see that there were additional details added to some of our millwork and doors and such on the interior, which is great. Now, what if though we turned everything off in terms of edge style? Let's go ahead and do that. How we do that is we simply reselect that word, which will remove the check mark from that area. And now what we'll do is we'll see what this house looks like without any edges on at all, and we can get a little bit more of a realistic view of our file. Next, we're going to play with something called Face Style within SketchUp. And this is where it gets very interesting, as we actually can look at the combinations of certain edges on and certain face styles selected to create a variety of opportunities for displaying our drawing in different ways. Let's start by turning back on our edges under View, Edge Style, Edges. Wonderful. Next, we will go to View, Face Style. And you'll notice here that we have a variety of options: wireframe, hidden line, shaded, shaded with textures, and monochrome. You'll notice that there's also an X-ray option, but it's separated by a line. What that means is X-ray can be turned on while any of the other ones is also turned on. So it's an add-on to what exists below the line. Let's start out with the wireframe option and select that. When I select wireframe, the shaded with textures option will go away and be replaced by wireframe. Wow. Now what this gives us is every single line that is part of this drawing, which is quite impressive. If I was drawing this from scratch in AutoCAD, there would be a lot of drawing that I would need to do, but you can literally see every edge in this case. We often don't use wireframe, but it's a good analysis. Let's now go back and choose Hidden Line. Wonderful. Now in the Hidden Line option, I am able to get a drawing where it's simply, essentially, a sketch of the house or whatever it is you have as a model. And this could be something that I print or hand render or add other things to, etc., just to get that sort of non-rendered look as though it's a sketch. Now we will be learning today how to turn this into what would look like a pencil sketch, which becomes very exciting, but that would be Hidden Line. Now with Hidden Line, you might decide to turn other edges on because we're only dealing with edges. So what if I turned profiles on, for example? It gives me a nice thicker line to the edge. Or perhaps I would turn on Depth Cue and we get a really good pen-like drawing of our file. Let's move to View, Face Style, and Shaded. Now, in this version, we get just the basic colors that are used in the model, but none of the textures. You might ask, why would I use a shaded file instead of textures? Well, there are times when our file gets so large that it's difficult on the software and our computer kind of becomes a little bit laggy to have our textures on. So in most cases, the reason that I would use just a shaded drawing is to help my computer speed up a little bit so that I can work a little more quickly. Under Face Style, you'll also notice monochrome. Monochrome is a way to understand the value of the textures without actually seeing the textures themselves. So if I have dark values, it would read as a darker value like on the roof. And for the lighter values, you'll actually get more of a grayscale drawing in front of you, which can be useful depending on what you're needing for that project. So what I'd like you to do is play with every single combination that you can think of under the View, Face Style and Edge Style possible in Sketchup. Let's move on then to what X-Ray can do for us within our Sketchup model. And to do that, what we will do is we will come back and reset our model to have only Edge Style and Profiles on. As well, under Face Style, I'd like you to select Shaded with Textures, okay? So that's kind of our default setting for SketchUp. Now, X-Ray is useful for two reasons. I'll tell you, I went through a phase of my life where I just loved X-Ray. Let's take a look at what this looks like under Face Style. So we're going to go to View, Face Style, and turn X-Ray on. Kind of strangely beautiful, is it not? Let's take a look. Oh my goodness, there's something so architectural about it and so beautiful about it. We actually get to see edges and faces in an X-ray sort of mode. But here's where it has great use. I will tell you, I have done a few animations this way, and that's great. But where it's very useful is if I need to select an endpoint from within the house, for example, or connect to a piece that's difficult to get to unless I'm seeing through the model, then this is a really great way to actually turn this on or off as you need while you're working. But if you find that there's some way to create something very beautiful in terms of a view, goodness, I mean, I would think that might be a pretty beautiful view for your portfolio for something you've designed. It just has a certain sort of architectural look to it. Okay, let's go back now to our default settings under Edge Style with edges and profiles on. And with Face Style, we're going to go ahead and turn X-Ray off. Now, one of the things that really helps our drawing to look real, if you will, or a little more professional, would be that we really want to get rid of the blue, the red, the green axis. We want to be able to turn that off, and we can. We want to be able to get rid of the default person that's there, so we'll go ahead and click on her and delete her at this point, now that we have some perspective. And we want to be able to turn this kind of like gray and blue backdrop into something that's just plain white, so it almost looks like plain white paper. How we do that is we're going to go over to our default tray on the right hand side. You'll notice that I am scrolling. and we're going to look for a menu item called Styles. Now, Styles is a very fun way to give you a little bit more of that creative sketch look, or remove the background colors, and you can really customize it now. So what we really want to do is get used to using our Styles menu and our view menus with Edge Style and Face Style, all of those together. Once you find the default styles area, or the styles area, we're going to go ahead and look at the options that we have under this down arrow where it says default styles. Now, my very favorite one is in the default styles menu, and it's called Construction Documentation Style. I love that. It's simply this. It's a white backdrop, and it keeps your textures on, and it keeps your outlines on. Okay? But what I encourage everyone to do right now is to play with some of these default styles. This one, for example, under default, is a hidden line style that keeps the white backdrop. Now, you can take the hidden line style and you can be like, that's really great, but I just want another edge on. So you might turn profile edges on, or maybe even depth Q on, and you can create something that has a white backdrop that looks very much like a pen drawing. Okay? Now, additionally, there are some other ones under assorted. Now, I do caution you, not just assorted, but sketchy edges, straight lines, and a bunch of competition winner kinds of styles that you can use as well. I do caution you that once we start to play with some of these styles, it does slow your system down. And so be very careful that after you're done creating a look that you like and taking a picture of it, which we will learn to do today, go back to that default style that you started with at the beginning, just so that you can move about in record speed. Okay, let's take a look at some of the assorted styles. Blueprint, cool. Brushstrokes on canvas. Chipboard with fine marker, not crazy about that one. Kind of like this generic CAD one, because if you turn off the textures, maybe go to hidden line, you can kind of get a really neat AutoCAD look here. This one's sort of fun. Pencil on tracing paper. What if we had that with a monochrome, or maybe with shaded? Kind of fun little sketch. Snow, vignette. Let's take a look at some of the sketchy edge styles. Okay, what about this one? Brushstrokes. Ooh, I do enjoy that one. And maybe on this one, we turn depth Q on. Let's look at this one. Neat. Okay, your job right now is to play with all of our styles menu, as well as seeing what that would look like with a variety of face or edge styles on or off. Enjoy. Okay, now that we have a good understanding of our styles menu and our view menu, I'd like to point out a couple of other things that will make your drawing really, really pop. So what we'll do for this is we will come back to default styles, choose the construction documentation style so that we're back to textured faces and simple edges. Now, this is a wonderful one to start with because it doesn't take up too much space or energy, if you will, on your computer, but you'll notice that it does leave us with that axis. So we have our blue and our green and our red axis, and we don't want that. So where you can turn that off is under your view menu, and you'll notice here that I can actually turn off these colored lines under axes. So let's go ahead and click axes, and this is perfect because now we have a white backdrop, we have our textures on, and we have our edges on, and we have something essentially that we can snip or export to bring into Photoshop or into PowerPoint to present to our client. Wonderful. The second thing I want to point out to you under the view menu is something called shadows. Now this gets very exciting. Now, I will say to you this, always work with your shadows off and always work with your edges on. So once we turn the shadows on here, this will be for final presentation mode only, and we want to make sure that if our computer's getting really laggy, little thing to check is if our shadows are on, okay? Because we don't want to have them on as we're working. Let's go ahead now, though, and turn those on and see what this looks like. Okay, what if we have our shadows on and all of our edges off? Take a look at how this gets even more real. Oh, yes, shadows are on edges are off, and we can actually get a real-time shadow happening in our drawing. Very exciting. But it gets even better. If we go over to the default tray on the right-hand side, you will notice that there is a shadows area in your default tray. Now, if for some reason that got toggled off, we can turn that back on again by going to our window menu. Now, this is kind of covered in a more advanced SketchUp class, but a little note that you can make in the PDF that I posted for you is that under our window menu, this is an area where we're really able to toggle off certain menu areas within our default tray. So you'll notice I'm hovering over Window, Default Tray, and Shadows. If for some reason Shadows is not selected or checked, you can go ahead and turn that on so that it will appear for you in your default tray. Now notice how in our default tray in our Shadows area, this will tell us the time of day that either it is or the area that we're in. So you can choose an area of the world that you want to select to give you some accurate shadows. This actually has geographical information relative to the sun's location and where the earth is. So you can choose time of day. Watch this. It's very exciting as I move the time of day. This is where if I'm in a real face-to-face classroom, students are going, oh, which is very exciting for me. So if I move the time of day, I actually get the length of the shadow will move and increase or decrease according to what time of day it is. I can also change the time of year where the shadow will get longer or shorter based on whether it's summer or winter. Super cool. Okay. Now I usually play with this to get the best rendering that I can. And so I kind of like more of a longer shadow or where the shadow is very evident to me whilst the textures remain kind of bright. You can also lighten the drawing. You can also darken the shadows or the drawing itself. And you can actually use the sun for shading here, which really does take a lot of space. Play around with that to give yourself a really realistic look to your drawing. Get it into a view that you think is most beneficial to your model with the shadows you like. You may also go ahead and play with the edge style, the backdrop, and the removal of the axis so we can go into our final step today, which is export. One final thing to be aware of under the view and camera areas would be an area where we can essentially take a look at basic view settings that are very, very helpful in understanding plan view, front elevations, and so forth. So something I want to point out to you will be these settings right here, which are under the camera menu, camera, standard views, and you'll notice that we have a variety of views that are very useful, again, for elevation, top views, side views, etc. Now, typically we do have shortcuts for these as well, which you can see on my screen here. So if you find you do want some of these view shortcuts set, you simply need to go to the view menu and then to the toolbars menu. And you need to simply select those view toolbars. In fact, you might want to turn a variety of these on and take a look at them just to see how far you get later on after the course. Many of these menus get reviewed in courses later on in SketchUp in more intermediate and advanced classes. But if we go ahead and under the camera menu, choose standard views and front, we can get a perfect front elevation. You'll notice it's still in 3D, so in a couple seconds I'm going to show you how to make that 2D. But let's take a look at the right elevation, or the back elevation, right? So that gives you that perfect view that you don't have to actually orbit and try your best to get it perfect. Now, if you want your elevation mode in 2 dimensions, and many of us do because it gives us really accurate information to the drawing, the way that we do that is we use our camera menu, and rather than be in a perspective view, we go ahead and choose parallel projection. You'll notice that immediately puts this into a standard elevation view. So I'm going to go back to front view, and we have a perfect elevation here that would be similar to AutoCAD. So I can go ahead and change my face style to hidden line, turn my edges back on, and I get a very, very interesting architectural front elevation with shadows on, with my edges on, and I'm in two-dimensional mode, which is just absolutely amazing. Now make sure that you don't work with parallel projection on, but rather when you're ready to model a little bit more, go further in your drawing, that you turn perspective back on in order to work. But this is a wonderful way to finish off your model. Now, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to get myself into a view that I find interesting. So I'm going to go ahead and edit the time of year on this drawing. I'm going to edit the time of day to something that I think is attractive and or useful. I'm going to turn on a few edges that, no, that's too much. Nope, not good at all. Turn that off. I think I'll turn on maybe extension just to get a slight overlap in that drawing so it looks a little bit drafted. Going to make sure that my axes are off and that I have a white backdrop. When I'm in the final phases of any SketchUp model, I do want to be able to export my file so that it is in JPEG format or something that would be in an image file format so that I can then bring that into something like PowerPoint or Photoshop to send to my client. In order to do that, we will go to the File menu. We'll make sure we're always saving our SketchUp file, of course. But when we want to export out the file as a JPEG, what you do is you select File, and then Export, and then 2D Graphic. And in the graphic options, you'll notice that JPEG is by default. And so I'm going to go ahead and call this House. You could also choose a bitmap. You could make this a PDF if you like, or you can even make this a PNG file. It's really up to you. But if I go ahead and save this as a JPEG file, I'm going to save it to my desktop called House and export it. I can later go back to my desktop and look for the file called House. And when I open that file, I have something that is quite lovely that I can insert, Photoshop further, modify with markers, or do whatever it is that I wish to do with it at that point.